This video explains how to use the index of a pandas data frame in the Python programming language. So without too much talk, let's dive into the Python code. As a very first step of this tutorial, we need to import the pandas library, as you can see in the first line of code. And then we also need to create an example data frame using the DataFrame constructor. So after running these lines of code, a new data frame called data is created. And we can print this data frame below the code box by using the print function. So after running these lines of code, you can see that a new data frame has been created, which contains 9 rows and the 4 columns x1, x2, x3 and x4. Now let's assume that we want to convert those index values to an additional column of our data frame. Then we can apply the code that you can see in the third code box. So in the first line of this box, I'm creating a copy of our data frame because I also want to keep an original version of our data frame. So after running this line of code, a new data set called data new1 is created. And then in the next step, I'm creating a new column in this new data frame. And this column should be called index. And I'm setting this column equal to the index values of our data frame. So after running this line of code, our data frame is updated, and we can see that by printing the data frame once again below the code box using the print function. And then you can see that we have added a 5th column to our data frame, which is called index. And this column contains the index values of our input data frame. It's also possible to do the opposite, so to convert the values in one of the columns to the index values. And this is what I want to show you in the next code box. So in this line of code, I'm using our input data frame, and then I'm using the setIndex function. And within this function, I'm specifying the name of the column that I want to use as the index of our data frame. And then I'm storing the output of this in a new data frame object that I'm calling data new2, and I'm printing this data frame below the code box. So after running these lines of code, you can see that we have created another data frame which contains only the columns x1, x2 and x4. However, the column x3 has been used as the index of our data frame. So as you can see, the values that have been stored in the column x3 are now used as index values. It's also possible to reset the index values to arrange from 0 to the number of rows of our data frame, as you can see in the next code box. So in this case, I'm using the data frame data new2 that I have created before in the previous example. And then I'm using the resetIndex function to reset the indices of our data frame. And I'm storing the output of this in a new data set that I'm calling data new3. And once again, I'm printing this new data set below the code box. So after running these lines of code, you can see below the code box that we have created another data frame. And as you can see, the index values of this data frame have been reset to arrange from 0 to 8. And you can also see that the previous index values, the values of the column x3, have been added as first column to our data frame. It's also possible to merge multiple data frames based on their index values. And this is what I want to show you in the next example, starting in the 6th code box. So as a first step for this example, we need to create another data frame, as you can see in these lines of code. So after running these lines of code, a new data frame called data2 is created. And we are also printing this data frame below the code box. So as you can see, we have created another data frame containing 5 rows. And you can see that the index values of this data frame are equal to a range from 6 to 10. You can also see that the columns of this data frame are called differently compared to our first input data frame, because our first data frame contained the columns x1, x2, x3 and x4, and this data frame contains the 3 columns y1, y2 and y3. Now let's assume that we want to merge our 2 data frames based on their index values. Then we can use the merge function, as you can see in the next code box. And within the merge function, we need to specify the names of our two data frames that we want to merge. So in this case, the data frames are called data and data2. Then I'm specifying the left index argument and the right index argument to be equal to true to specify that we want to merge our data based on the index values. And then I'm printing our new data frame below the code box. So as you can see, we have performed an inner join based on our two data frames, data and data2, because you can see we have only kept those rows where both data frames contained the same index value, so the rows with the index values 6, 7 and 8. And you can also see that we have kept all the columns of our two input data frames. That's all I wanted to explain in this video. In case you want to learn more on this topic, you may check out my homepage, statisticsglobe.com, because on my homepage I have recently published a tutorial in which I'm explaining the content of this video in some more detail. I will put a link to this tutorial into the description of the video, so you can find it there. If you have liked this video or if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below. I'll try to respond to all comments as soon as I can. Furthermore, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notified about future video releases. I have already published about 500 videos on this channel and I'm releasing new videos on a daily basis. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next video.